than 400 children whisked away from the Yearning for Zion Ranch 3 weeks ago, now on the way to more than a dozen different group homes.
More than 400 children seized from a polygamous ranch into foster care. Lawyers for the children have filed a temporary restraining order.
All 416 children will remain in state custody while adults undergo DNA testing.
More DNA samples were taken today at that polygamy compound to help sort out the families in that huge custody battle.
How does a mother allow their child to become susceptible to some culture of abuse?
The judge in the case has agreed to let nursing mothers stay in group homes with their babies.
That's an effort to be able to keep these kids in as large groups of their own siblings and relatives as possible.
This video of the raid released last night by the church shows tearful departures and heavily armed officers directing the women and children.
The judge will hear more details about each child's individual case. Ultimately, the judge will have 1 full year to determine whether these children should be kept from their parents permanently.
Right now, as I'm speaking, 437 children are being held from their parents. Texan law enforcers have transported them from where they were born and raised and are now keeping them in remote foster homes for what could be a year, at least.
The children must be, under the law, under constitutional law and under Texas statutory law, must be returned to the parents. What the judge is essentially saying is, well, I'll just keep these children and send them into foster families while we sort this out. That's directly contrary to what the law requires.
The children in question are members of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, which resides in the Yearning for Zion Ranch in El Dorado, Texas. The FLDS is a polygamous group where males wear semi-formal attire while females wear 19th century high-neck dresses. Authorities have taken the children for their protection during an investigation of alleged sexual abuse of minors within the commune, allegations which have since been regarded as questionable.
Investigators say they haven't found that teenager and the call may have been a hoax.
The FLDS's religious zeal and alternative lifestyle have given the media all the characteristics they need to label the group as a cult. With that single word, numerous thoughts and images come to mind. Memories of Jonestown and the Branch Davidians of Waco, Texas surface, both with unfathomably fatal endings. Surely if the FLDS is a cult, the government has every right to step in and keep its members from harm. Or does it? In 1978, the People's Temple, a religious group with a settlement in Guyana, South America, took part in a mass suicide after United States government officials began probing into the conduct of its charismatic leader, Jim Jones. The massacre, which ended in the deaths of over 900 men, women, and children, was named after the settlement in which the group resided, Jonestown. In hindsight, it is generally agreed that the government should have done more to investigate Jones's activities and possibly prevent such unfathomable death. 15 years later, a Christian-based religious group known as the Branch Davidians, headed by David Koresh, was held under siege by the FBI and the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. After 51 days, the Branch Davidians' commune, located in Waco, Texas, went up in flames, killing the 76 men, women, and children inside. Congressional hearings held afterwards showed that the government grossly mishandled the situation with over-aggressive tactics. There is even evidence suggesting that their tanks and flashbang grenades started the fire. So here we have two religious groups, both labeled by the media as cults, and two very different responses by the government, both resulting in slaughter. So as we look now at the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, what is the appropriate action to take? Perhaps the best way to answer this question is to look at the perceptions we have of cults. How do we deal with cults within our own points of view? What do we think a cult is? According to dictionary.com, a religion is a specific fundamental set of beliefs or practices generally agreed upon by a number of persons or sects. Meanwhile, a cult is a particular system of religious worship, especially with reference to its rites and ceremonies. So if the textbook definition of a cult is more or less identical with that of a religion, how can we hold distinct differences between the two in our minds? I could take the question to authoritative religious figures or so-called experts, but
they have no one to turn to get a take on what reality really is.
They already seem to have closed the discussion. So I did the next best thing. I took my questions to my peers, hoping that their broad liberal arts education and diverse opinions would help shed some light on the subject.
But my mom actually is like a witch.
The results were astounding.
Sometimes you have to get out of reach.
Before I ask my fellow students to define the word cult and suggest a proper way to deal with them, I thought it would be best to get their opinion on religion and what the term means to them.
When I think of religion, I think of it could be good. In some cases, for certain people, it's totally the right thing, and I have close personal relationships with people who are very religious and that definitely deeply believe in God, Christianity.
I think religion, for everyone is just believing in something bigger than yourself to call upon or ask upon when we need some form of guidance.
When people think of religion, they think of, obviously a certain type of belief, and usually kind of a closed-off mind to anything else or any kind of idea.
In some cases, closed-mindedness. Think of being caught up in the past.
I think there's a lot of hypocrisy associated with religion. I don't know, at least the word just kind of has some negative connotations for me. A lot of kind of judgmentalness.
I have lots of negative associations with religions. I just sort of dislike them as an idea because I see it as a belief without a basis, and I see it as, or at least historically, I understand it to be a large part of just a way to hold people in their position and convince them to act in a certain way without them actually figuring it out for themselves.
With a religion, you see a couple basic organizational points. One point is that it's a social structure. You set up, your 10 Commandments or whatever. A lot of religion has to do with setting up a way that society can organize itself.
I tend to think of religion as more of a cultural thing. And so these groups of people get together and celebrate together and sing together and have festivals together and do things together, which is wonderful. It's a really great way for communities to be built and for experiences to be considered important in the lives of the people in the community.
I don't know what springs to mind when I think of religion. I just think of all the people around me and their own takes on it.
Like knitting circles, for example, or book groups. Okay. It's a way for people to get together and have shared experiences and do things together and build friendships and feel connected to other people.
Additionally, you find with religions the need to explain the unexplained. Why do people die? Why am I poor and he's rich? All these sort of ethereal, sort of philosophical questions that are hard to answer on a daily basis.
I know that when I have concerns or issues in my life, I do talk to God or ask him a question or ask him why something is happening in my life and what direction I'm supposed to go in. And I believe in signs in that sense, that I would ask God to bring me a sign so I'm heading in the right direction.
I understand in a lot of cases that it does serve a function and gives people meaning, but I disagree with that sort of that meaning which is given without basis. I think people should be able to find their own meaning in things without it being prescribed to them.
People get afraid of when people have a specific mindset, and when you try to impress that on someone, and when someone tries to impress that mindset on you, a lot of people become uncomfortable because they may or may not believe in it, or they don't want to believe in it, they don't want to hear those kind of things.
An ex-friend of mine tried to convert me once. It was pretty horrible. Like, he decided he was in love with me and then said the only issue was that I was Jewish and that he was sad because I'd be going to hell and that I really should be Christian, and then gave me this CD.
I have a problem with religion in that it becomes singular, in that, if you believe in the Christian faith, you cannot accept the faith of a Jew or a Muslim. That, your God is the same God, and yet you have these different prophets, and so therefore you can't be accepting. So I guess it's religious intolerance that is what upsets me.
In terms of the world, it's a tough subject for me because I disagree with it, and I don't like how it's been the source of bloodshed and serious disagreements in world relations for centuries.
That's a big problem today, is that, you know, again, you start to get into organized religion. I think that's what people tend to think of as religion, as like, you know, church and groups, central meeting of people, whereas spirituality, it tends to be thought of as more individual, something of more of a personal belief.
Often what ends up happening is that religions won't be considered valid unless these viewpoints are held by a broad spectrum of people. But one of the things that I find hard to believe about that is the extent to which any two people can have similar beliefs about the nature of the universe.
I don't think any two people have the same religion, because it is a very individualized thing.
It has to be a personal decision for it to really deeply affect you. And that doesn't mean, you know, that you have to deny it if you're born into it, and it doesn't mean that you have to accept it immediately. I think the main thing about religion is goes towards faith, and with faith, inevitably there is doubt, and in that doubt, you're questioning your own beliefs, your own thoughts on the belief system. And so it's a give and take process, but ultimately it begins and ends with your own perception, with something that you have to choose to deal with.
It's hard to be within a culture and to extract yourself from that culture's beliefs, and what also that extends to is family beliefs and family morals and family ethics, and a big part of that comes from religion.
I did know a girl who was a Mormon, and not as a religious Mormon as others, but did grow up in a Mormon house and would wear certain things to school and couldn't wear certain things to school, and when we had dances and things, she had to cover up completely and didn't wear a whole lot of makeup, and had very strict guidelines of her that her parents had set for her. But nothing like her dad had like 5 wives or anything of that nature.
My girlfriend and I were talking about how she thinks it's morally reprehensible to raise your child with your religious beliefs, because to create an identity for children create their identities when they're younger around their parents, and when it's easy to say, oh, I'm Jewish, or oh, I'm Hindu, or oh, I'm Muslim, without really knowing what that entails. And after a while, for many people, I think it becomes so deeply a part of their self that were they to be shown an alternate way of looking at life, it would be harder for them to understand.
It was definitely a situation that this was something her family did, and when she was born, obviously was brought up into, and was not a choice for her. She had no complaints about it or issues with it. It was just something that was a part of her life.
It's really tough, because I mean, you want to be able to raise a child, I would imagine, with your beliefs to a certain extent, and it would be hard, I think, for many parents to let the children experience many different options. You wonder to what extent intuition is possible without familial intervention, and whether it's possible without that aspect, like whether or not what makes sense to a person is because of it actually making sense to them, or because it makes sense to them within the frame of their cultural understanding or family understanding.
All right, so let's analyze what we've got. Religion is a belief in a higher supernatural power, either for guidance or explanation of things that to us may seem inexplicable. Religion is also a communal thing, something that can bring us closer to those around us and represent an entire culture. At the same time, though, one's own religion is something that's absorbed and expressed on a personal, individual basis. However, religion can also be a source of hypocrisy, elitism, and intolerance, and it can be hard to break from if it's something one has been acquainted with for an extended period of time. Okay, now let's move on to cults.
Well, my first thought is that Family Guy episode where Meg joins the cult.
I'm so glad you could join us, Meg. We're gonna have a great time on our trip.
A trip? Like to the beach? Because I didn't bring my bathing suit.
Oh, you won't need anything for where we're going. Excuse me, I've got to go mix the punch.
And they all have a mass suicide, like in San Francisco. So that's the kind of, I guess, stereotype of a cult that I think
of. Well, when I hear the word cult, I have to admit that honestly, my mind automatically jumps to like the devil worshipping, stereotypical goat, sacrificial.
First thing that comes to mind when I hear cult, I think of the Jonestown Massacre. I think that's the most culturally present example of a cult.
The biggest thing that comes to my mind when I think of cults would be Jonestown, because it was so chaotic and so on such a huge scale, 1,000 people.
My general reaction is cult is a negative word, but I mean, that's only from what I see of what I've seen of cults in the media, as portrayed in the media. I see them in a negative light.
I feel like cults maybe are just a little bit more extreme, but they base themselves in the same ideals that a lot of religions do, and they just take it to that next level.
Cults carry a very strong message that isn't vague and asks a lot of its members.
To me, the term tends to imply a group that is more radical in terms of the way that it manipulates its members. Or at least that's the association I have with them. I'm not sure if that's always true, but I think of it as, all right, well, they have cult status because they haven't gained status as a religion according to our government. And reason not just due to popularity in my mind. I don't think of it as like, oh, cults are just less popular than religions.
I think maybe the public idea of what a cult is a small religion, because any small group of people that believe something would be considered a cult. I don't think something's a religion unless it's established through time or whatever. But
okay.
But I think of a cult as something dangerous, and someone in charge of a cult as a person who is saying things they don't necessarily believe in order to get something.
I mean, technically speaking, I guess a religion would be one of the 7 major religions. And anything beyond that has a mass following, that makes itself so separate from society, would be a cult.
Wicca is something that I think of when I think of religious cults. Even though, I mean, it's pretty established, I guess, as a type of religion for people, but there are a lot of people that are really wary of it, I guess, and sort of think of it as weird and cult-like. Wicca is a lot about natural occurrences and spiritual beings in nature, more so than a particular god, but it's sort of turned into like a cult. It's got a cult-like following, I think, because people think of it as, oh, we're witches, let's do spells.
My friend just got in a secret society at Yale, and I think of that as being a cult too. Like, that's pretty messed up. There are a lot at Yale. I mean, what she said was that it's just an excuse for elite people to all get together and hang out.
A religion has to have some sort of supreme, superhuman order to it that, you're following because of that. I think a cult could be more down to earth in what it's there for. You could be just an ideal, an individual. It could be just something as simple as, you want to save trees. That could be a cult. You could have an entire group based around, we want to save trees, or whatever sort of, cause you feel is great, but not necessarily some sort of otherworldly cause.
It can be a religion, but it's just sort of like radicals, I guess. For anything, it could be political or social.
My first car that I drove was my dad's first car as well. He saved it in the family. It's a 1974 BMW 2002, and it was known as one of the great cult cars of its time, and still is, because it was such a great car, and people loved it so much. And basically, anyone who got in the driver's seat of one of them, everybody was like, "Oh, I love this car. I got to have it." And what does that mean? What's the difference between that and something like the Ku Klux Klan, where that's typically known as a cult?
there was this really small group of white supremacists in my community, like 5 people, but they were this huge. It was a big deal that they even existed where I lived, and that's all. And my parents would always say like, "Oh, like they're part of this cult."
Wait a minute, hold on there. Now I can't remember why, but for some reason it's so strange to me that Miss Koch's parents referred to these people as being in a cult. Now why is that?
But my mom actually is like a witch.
Ah, yes. How could I possibly have forgotten? So let's hear some more about Galen's mother, who is actually a pagan.
When I was young, when I came of age, so to speak, as a woman, she had this party with all of her friends, all of her female friends, on the night of the lunar eclipse. And she put on like her Celtic woman music, and like we went outside and like danced under the moon when it was eclipsing. So yeah, pagan rituals, pagan Celtic. She's very like Irish, proud to be a Celt, not necessarily proud to be Irish Catholic. I don't think it's a pagan ritual so much as like hippie. I mean, they're just a bunch of old hippies. So their parents are all really religious. So it's like a way to rebel, to be like, oh, I don't believe in God.
Well, there have been examples of cults where they get like teenage kids that don't feel like they belong anywhere, and they give them a place to belong.
Mom and Dad don't understand me. I need to go be daring and do something crazy.
But that's not really anything to do with religion. It's just sort of finding, an identity or some place to be with other people that you think are like you.
I feel it's more a religion of a minority in a population. Whether that's a minority of people who are socially awkward or just ethnically different, regardless, it would still be sort of a cult. And I think you have to keep in mind that almost every major religion at this point was at one point a cult.
If it's a religion with less than 1 million people, every religion starts as a cult.
Buddhism obviously started with Buddha and his small group of followers gets bigger. Similar thing with Jesus Christ, and then Christianity springs from a whole group of cults.
A couple thousand years ago, Christianity was a cult. And despite some of the terrible things Christianity's done in the past 2,000 years, it's done some great things too.
Cults become religions if they continue long enough, and where now cult has a negative connotation due to all the brainwashing thing, the Scientology is considered a cult, all these sorts of things, is that I think that if a serious study was to be done of early religious cults and what happened to them, it would be harder to be objective in that study.
Well, all right then, let's do an objective study. We've talked about religions, we've talked about cults. Now let's put the two together and try to find the definitive differences.
I wouldn't know how to differentiate in that type of circumstance between a cult and a religion. I think I'm just kind of getting stuck on those words, and I feel like at times they can be interchanged.
Oh, right, yeah, I forgot. It's like really, really hard to do that.
It's basically semantics, in my opinion, because they are so similar. It's a set of beliefs that you're following in a group. It's a group. There are group rituals, group beliefs, things that are set down within that community that you have to take on personally in order to be a part of that group. So I don't think there's too much of a difference.
The major one is merely that it's a minority over a majority thing. I mean, that's the main difference, keeping a lot of cults off of like the state-sponsored religions is that it's not the majority religion, or it's not even a very large minority.
I think the difference between a cult and a religion also has to do with the public's point of view.
I think that's the problem with a lot of smaller groups, is that they get labeled as cults because they are not a large group.
But certainly I don't think the size of the group has to do with whether or not it's a cult or a religion.
I think of, I guess, a religion as a much more popular cult with a basis of history, a basis in history, with not as cruel manipulation of its members.
A religion is a set of beliefs that a person or a group of people choose to follow. And a cult is a group of people that believe in something because they are being manipulated to believe in it. Although it's not for good.
Cult leaders usually have themselves in mind. And hopefully a religious leader like the Pope or any bishop or anywhere along that sort of hierarchical level within Christianity, and of course that's what I'm speaking from because that's what I know, hopefully those church leaders have the greater good of their congregation or their church at hand. You know, with Christian Science, it's still Christianity at the core, and although it has some views and ideas that are sort of, move farther out from the center of Christianity, it's still got Christianity at its center, so people, or at least I think, okay, that's still religion, it's still got its major core of Christianity at the center. But then you've got Scientology, which, from my understanding of it, I can't find any connection to any other of the major world religions within Scientology. It just seems so preposterous that somehow we can ascend to different levels and have different powers. It just seems like magic more to me.
The only reason I wouldn't refer to them as cults is because they're more mainstream in our, today, Scientology is like a mainstream religion only in the sense that you hear about it all the time. Not in the sense that a lot of people are Scientologists, but that because it comes up so much in conversation, because everyone's thinking, oh, what are the Scientologists doing? What do they believe? Who are they? Tom Cruise, that kind of thing. It's it's become so mainstream that it's hard to think of it as a cult.
There was this one period where I feel like people were doing Scientology because Scientology was the new black, and it was people did it because it was the new craze and the new fad at the time, and I found that very weird. And I'm not a religious person, but when I do think of religion, I do take it seriously, and I feel like people like Lindsay Lohan or Will Smith or Tom Cruise were just wearing the Kabbalah bracelets or doing the whole Scientology thing because everybody was doing it at the time, and I found that very odd and strange that religion was something you bought at a store.
People have a real issue with Scientology, saying that it's not a real religion, and I'm not a supporter, and I don't really know much about it, and it's based on a science fiction writer. But if a group of people choose to believe in it, then it is a religion. It's as much a religion as people believing in the Greek gods was a religion, and to me as much as Christianity or Judaism. It's a story, and whether it's right or not isn't for me to judge, but that's somebody's religion just because it seems far-fetched. A man walking on water or a guy parting an ocean isn't exactly realistic. So
I think things get branded as cults when they're so far out of line with what the rest of society deems as a religion.
All dressing the same, or dressing in a certain style, or deciding to purposely cut themselves off from society, or choosing not to use certain things in society that do appear to be out of the normal for today's society and today's world.
Cults are inherently separate from you and I, or from, your average religious person. So, and their beliefs are extreme enough to take that inherent separateness and make themselves more separate because most cults, I think the reason why people often confuse cults with communes is because cults do live in communal settings. They remove themselves.
I know I would be a person to look at that, and many other people I know would look at that and think that is very strange and very odd that they chose to do that and live in that certain way when we, as we know, live this other way.
If there's some sort of unusual to the current societal norms, practice, or standard, I think as long as there's reason for it, as long as there's some kind of faith behind it, I don't think can necessarily be a bad thing. I mean, if it starts hurting other people, if it means blowing up abortion clinics, or murdering people, or even hurting people in any way, then that starts to become a problem.
Now, this is a very interesting point, especially when talking about these more marginalized religious groups. When a religious group of any kind brings harm to its members or to others, can the government step in? Wouldn't that be going against one of the most sacred of our rights as American citizens, the freedom of religion?
Freedom of religion, I hope, would more mean separate religion from state, do your own thing, but don't break our laws.
We let Native Americans take peyote even though it's, according to our laws, an illegal drug, and that sort of thing. And I feel like those sort of things are still acceptable because it's, well, I disagree with a lot of the government's limiting our behavior anyway, but those sort of behavioral practices that are not harming another, like the child does not have, the child's rights are being infringed upon. If you're just infringing on your own rights, if it's not the organization doing something that's really harmful to you, then I think that type of ritual is permissible, and the government should not be able to step in.
The freedom of religion extends to the point where you can advertise your religion, you can openly express the values of that religion.
I know what France does in terms of Scientology is if you're a member of Scientology in France, they'll send you a bunch of literature in the mail saying why Scientology is manipulating you in some way. And I feel like that's sort of educating the people who are becoming a part of this or falling into the trap, as I would see it, or as I think the government might see it, of a certain cult, is probably the best. And the best policy, still taking into consideration one's free will, because I think the reason why a cult, or in my opinion also a religion, is bad for a person is when it does take away their sort of ability to make their own decisions and exercise their free will. And I think the government, as a body which is trying to protect our liberty, if there is a group, organization that has really such a strong hold on us that we no longer have liberty of our own, then that's the government's place to step in. But I don't think that they should shut down that religion unless it really determines that they are doing something exceptionally beyond the bounds of our laws.
I would be a fan of education, I guess, of spreading information about alternate ways of living and letting the people choose. But I don't think actual military force or actual stopping of something from happening would be good.
I think it was Law and Order, but I don't remember. Some TV show that had like either 2 episodes or just 1 episode that had sort of 2 parallel cases where one was a couple who refused to give antibiotics to their children or to their child who was very ill. And those antibiotics would have saved its life. And they said that no, the power of prayer will save its life, and the baby died, and they charged the couple with murder. And then on the flip side, they were charging the head of a very small religion, a cult, with abuse of animals, something like that, because they killed a chicken as part of, or they killed a goat as part of their religious practice.
Well, animals. I would tend to, well, that gets into vegetarianism and whether meat is murder.
I think killing an animal for religious practice to ban something like that in a country where we think that slaughterhouses and chicken McNuggets are okay is completely hypocritical. If we were a vegetarian society and outlawed the killing of animals, that would be one thing. But until you tell McDonald's to stop it, you can't tell a small cult to stop it.
There is a line that that the government has to draw sometimes. If the religion within it's, even though there is freedom of religion, unfortunately, when things like that happen, there isn't a freedom of practice.
Constitutionally, you have to make amendments that allow for a civilization to exist, and a civilization could not exist if you were to allow people of religious cults to sacrifice other people. There would be absolute mayhem. So in order for a society to work, I think you would have to limit the amount of religious freedom someone could have in that sense.
There is a freedom to believe what you want to believe, but if that practice involves something that goes against the established laws of the government of which you reside in, I think it has the full right to step in and investigate and follow up on the rules set down.
I think it should be totally wide open until that cult or religion starts hurting people. And I think that's with the Jonestown massacre, that's what I keep coming back to. The government started to step in right as things were getting out of hand, when people's lives were being put to danger.
Because it was mass murder, because he forced 980 people to drink poison, that's murder. Given they were there willingly, I don't think they sacrificed their lives willingly. I think it was panic because he had killed that public official.
People wanted to get out but weren't allowed to. That's when we need to step in. And by we, I mean the American government. Otherwise, people should be given all the freedom they want to believe what they believe.
Obviously, if you're, taking someone, kidnapping them and sacrificing them to make an example, and it's against their will, then I think that's definitely up at a point where the government should step in. But if a person is that devoted to something and believes that strongly in it, it's their decision, it's their body, it's their life.
I mean, if I wanted to, I guess if I was part of a religion where I wanted to sacrifice myself, I think that would be okay, because that's your religion and that's your choice.
But then, of course, you raise the idea of maybe they're being brainwashed. And at that point, I really don't know where you can make that distinction, where you can decide who's being manipulated and who's not.
I think it is the government's responsibility to at least ask the person, you really sure that you're not being brainwashed and that you really do want to be part of this? And then I think after that, the government, they've done what they can to help their people and make sure that, people are happy, or at least searching for that. Then I think that's where the responsibility ends.
I feel like there are so many other things that you could do to show devotion and show support for your religion or belief in your belief system that doesn't have to involve that. I feel like praying and going to your church, temple, hall, whatever your belief system is, attending services. I feel like there's so much more that one can do to support one's faith and religion and show devotion and loyalty to your religion that doesn't have to involve that.
I mean, I could say, yeah, I think that should be outlawed, but it just feels like there would be no way to enforce a law like that. And if there's that sort of agreement going on and someone wants to be sacrificed, it will happen.
The government can stop whoever they want, but the people that they stop, they're not gonna stop believing in what they believe in. And they'll probably just take it out in other ways and go to higher means or just become internally dissatisfied. And I mean, it just doesn't work out.
Those traditions and those kind of acts are so deeply rooted in the marks of the religion that go way back, that things like that will never change because they're just so deeply rooted in history and things like that, that it would be very hard for those things to change and those things to turn around and for people to say that that's not necessary to do anymore because people have been doing it for thousands of years.
Well, I think in the same way that we have sort of laws against, libel, slander, I think you sort of have to have similar laws protecting sort of the respectability of a religion and or investigating into whether it really is, a religion and not just, a man looking for control of people.
I think the government absolutely should have stepped into Jonestown because that's a group of 1,000 people. And that was so dangerous. Jim Jones started out so innocent, but he began, within 2 years of his movement, it became maniacal. So there were early warning signs of danger. Once the membership got up to like 400, 200 even, things should have been there should have been investigations, things should have been looked into because it was on such a massive scale. But then it's like, how do you take your average like Elvis cult of 100 people who maybe believe that Elvis was God, and the government wouldn't think that was dangerous because it is so absurd. I mean, that's a tough question.
I think that's a difficult question. I think a lot of times you think the difference between good and bad is merely that I'm on this side of the line and you're on the other side. I think it's very hard for the average individual to step over the line and look at the other side from an objective or even from their point of view. I think it's very tricky. I don't know if there's an easy way to do it.
There is no easy way to do it. It is a difficult task, but that doesn't mean that we should find our solutions through haphazard means. 437 children are unconstitutionally being withheld from their parents during an investigation which might be based on faulty evidence. But even if the allegations are true, is this really the best way to deal with the situation? Or is it that our government is too put off by the different lifestyle of a secluded population within its borders?
The government hinders on the practice of a religion in such a way that denies it the right to practice safely and freely within the defined laws set down by the country, then it's going, the government's going a little too far.
Their outlandish beliefs of polygamy and outdated fashion are regarded as alien and potentially harmful by those who believe in men who walk on water and part the Red Sea.
I'm not sure having a belief that's a little more unorthodox is necessarily a bad thing.
We label groups like the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints and the Branch Davidians under the shadow of the Jonestown Massacre. But maybe instead of focusing on what we neglected to do in the past, we should be focused on what we are doing in the present.
People are their own individuals and do have their own individual beliefs.
Who am I to say or judge which is right?
I think accepting that would be one step towards world peace.
Take care of all of my children. sundown, safe from the devil's hand. You gotta make them a pillow on the hard ground. I'll be going up to Beulah Land. You can put